I'd like to welcome everybody to the State Board of Elections meeting. I am Peter Kaczynski, and I am chairing this meeting today. I'd just like to make a few opening remarks for myself, I guess. I was honored to be appointed to this position yesterday, and I want to thank Senator Skelos, Leader Kolb, and Governor Cuomo for the appointment. It's an honor and a privilege to be a member of the State Board of Elections Commissioners. As some of you may know, I worked here at the board for many years. I've held various positions around here, and always enjoyed my service here, and left here a few years ago to work in the legislature. So I fortunately have the experience of both working in the executive branch here at the board and also in the legislative branch. So I started my career in the counties, so I also have a local perspective. So I hope I'm bringing something to this job that is worthwhile. I think I am, and I look forward to the future and going forward. In addition to thanking them for the appointment, I want to thank Jim Walsh, who I'm replacing. Jim's a good friend of mine. I know Jim has been looking to move out. He's a busy man, and I think he's happy to move on and do other things, but I want to thank Jim for his service here at the board. I worked with Jim for years, and he's a very good guy, so I just wanted to also mention him and his service as well. So if the other commissioners have anything they want to say, I want to just make sure I introduce Doug Kellner, who's the co-chair of the commission, Greg Peterson on my left, who's a fellow commissioner, and Andy Spano on my far right, who's also a commissioner. So those, just so everybody knows who the four commissioners are serving here, and I didn't know if they had any. I wanted to get to the meeting. I don't know if they had any opening statements.
Thank you, Peter. I want to congratulate you on your appointment. We're very grateful to have you join us because you do bring such experience and qualification to the job, and I know that we worked well together with you as executive director, and indeed you were instrumental in setting a very positive path for the implementation of the new voting systems in New York, and it was a great accomplishment, as well as many other things that you did in your service as executive director. I, in particular, want to thank Commissioner Walsh, who has done a very great service in his years as co-chair of the board. We worked very well together, and while I'm very happy to have you on board, we will miss Commissioner Walsh, and we want to thank him and acknowledge his very fine service.
Thank you, Doug.
I'd like to take this opportunity to, first of all, welcome you, Peter, to the board. It's a great group of people. We have super staff here, and I know that through your experience, not only here, but elsewhere in government, you're going to be a great addition. I'd also like to extend my gratitude to Jim Walsh, who, for those of you who know him, you couldn't find a finer gentleman, a man who had always an even keel, knew how to get things done in a quiet manner, knew when to stand up when standing up was called for, and knew how to compromise and again to accomplish an end. I was very interested in not only the service of this board, but watching it move forward through a computer age, as we have shifted from the old lever machines to lever machines to a new system, and he was very much a part of that. And I would like to thank him for his service. On a personal note, I consider him a very good friend, and certainly will be missed.
Commissioner Stone?
I want to welcome you also, Peter. You come with a fantastic reputation, of knowledge certainly about this particular area. I'm looking forward to working with you. But I will miss Commissioner Walsh, who I found as amenable as my colleague there did. And I look forward to working with you. And I reiterate everything everyone else said.
Well, thanks very much, and I'm also just want to say how thrilled I am that so many people came out today to welcome me to the State Board of Elections. I didn't even know word was really out that I was going to be on here, but this is fantastic because I really didn't expect this kind of turnout. So thank you very, very much for that as well. Just wanted to say that. So I guess I'd like to get to the meeting. What I'd like to do is we have a meeting agenda, which I think we should get right to. And we do have a few items, some of which I am more familiar with than others probably. I have tried to bring myself up to speed on the issues that are presented and before the board today. And I would hope we can move forward on these. That said, I would like to start with the minutes of the last meeting. I don't feel that I can really act on those, but I'd ask if there's a motion to
Move to approve the minutes for the public meeting and the executive session as printed and distributed.
Is there a second? And then I would ask for a vote.
All right.
All right,
And I will abstain since I wasn't at the meeting. What we'd like to do is start with unit reports. Now, what I would ask is as I do unit reports, I'd like to have the individual that's giving the report to identify themselves, and then if you can give the report after that. So first off would be the executive, Bob Brem and Todd Valentine.
Todd Valentine here. Just a couple things we want to highlight from our written report is obviously the budget has passed and our budget is included in that. We are waiting for the formal certifications from the Division of Budget to do the spending. There's a number of things in there, but that should be coming shortly. We have with us, joining us today, and you'll hear from him shortly, is Bill Ryan, has joined our staff as the Chief Security Officer at this point is his title. He started last week. And just a reminder that the County Election Commissioners Association Conference is upcoming at the end of May. We are on the agenda, I think for Tuesday or Wednesday.
I'm sorry, Ted, I'm going to interrupt right
Yes,
there.
go ahead.
Chief Security Officer.
Oh, in the IT unit, I'm sorry. It's the title. We have the Chief Information Officer, which is currently a vacant position. He is the second level down in that unit. He is the Chief Security, the title is Chief Security Officer. Each agency is required to have one.
You're talking security of the computers?
Computer security,
I
yes,
see.
I'm sorry.
Okay. All right.
And a reminder that that conference is at the end of May. It's the Memorial Day week, and that we typically make presentations. I don't have a copy of the agenda. We can get that to you.
We're on Thursday.
We're on Thursday.
I mean, there are a number of items, but the state board portion is Thursday. I think the only other item,
introduce yourself.
sorry, I'm Robert Brun, the other co-executive director. Welcome, Peter. It was pleasant working. I arrived here at a time when you were on your way to your legislative accomplishment. It'll be at least crisscrossed a few years, but also I was at the county commissioner level where we would often talk in that capacity. So welcome back.
Thank you.
With regard to, I think, some of the highlighted issues, I think, yes, the budget was a major issue, and I think we came through fine. There's a number of personnel items that we've included in our report to you as part of coming up to full staffing level in the compliance unit. We've continued to report how, job classifications, et cetera, but I think we're almost close to being finally up to full staff training, and it's proven to work out, I think, exceptionally well. It's a fine group of people, but I listed for you the most recent staff hirings. We welcome them. One just began today, and we have a number of other ones starting.
Are there vacancies in the staff?
We promoted one, so that created a vacancy that we went to look to fill, and I think there's one other that is pending, so, it's in the process of being filled. I think the only other item, and I think we'll talk about it a little bit further, probably in the IT, is the work we're doing on some of these technology projects is taking an awful lot of time. Without an IT director, Todd and I, with the help of John Conklin and Tom Connolly, have been helping to meet with the staff to at least keep the IT agenda moving forward. But they have three major projects that, with the way things are going, are kind of tied together because of the technology that is being deployed. We have the Nysboe program that all the equipment we purchase will be at end of life in 2016. So our proposal that we've been working on and should be completed in this fiscal year is to have the hardware and the software upgraded so we address those end-of-life issues before we meet end-of-life. So our target date to have that rolled over is December of this year with a little bit of extra work on knowledge transfer, et cetera, before the end of that contract. The other issue is the candidate management campaign finance system. As part of last year's budget was to give us money to upgrade those two systems. That, being as old as it is, had a target date to finish later in 2016. And one that has come up is the entire computer set network that we have. When we restacked from just down the street to this building, our data center, our computer center, was located at the state campus. It is, and that was just 2.5 years ago. We are being, that entity is moving to the College of Nanoscale, easier to call it CNSE or the Nano College. And that kind of is more urgent because the deadline is May to move that component. So, you know, they're all kind of tied together because of the technology, and I know they'll cover that. But just so we know that it's a major effort for the infrastructure to make sure, one, we're current and we meet the deadline. And it's taking a tremendous amount of energy from a number of people, all throughout the staff, and as you walk through the building, various consultants from OITS, the Information Technology Services.
So are you saying that the head of the IT unit is vacant right now?
Correct.
And how long has that been vacant?
It's just shy of a year. We've gone, it's a civil service position that we've done a round of interviews. They issued a new test that we were told to expect the new list, that we could consider a new round of interviews in March. It's now April, but they keep telling us any day now we should be getting that list so that we can.
So you're trying to do this major upgrade of the computers in the agency, but that vacancy is a hindrance, I'm assuming?
It's not helpful. I mean, we enjoy that.
So doesn't it seem to be a priority here to try to get this thing filled? And
We don't even have a list, though.
yeah, I mean,
Well, we had a list, and it's the same list that we interviewed when we hired the person who moved on.
right.
And we have enjoyed his continued assistance since he's moved on. He has continued to be he's not as available.
But a year's a long time.
Maybe a year's a long time. But it is a finite list that we came to the conclusion there's no one on that list in the reachable category that we could interview that would be appropriate to recommend. So we were waiting for the new list. As soon as that list comes out, we will review it again. The only other option is to reclassify the title to something different and get that list. Because it's
Well,
a
I will say to
competitive
you, I mean,
position.
just based on what little I'm hearing, it seems filling this position should be a priority if we're doing all these transitions of the computer system and migrating into new systems, and we're doing it without a head person. It just seems to me to be a recipe for problems, and, you know, to leave that vacant for a year, that's a really long time.
When you get down to the bottom of the list,
Yeah,
it's difficult
Fair enough.
sometimes to select somebody
fair enough,
who's adequate for the position.
absolutely.
And we haven't really left it vacant. It's not like.
Yeah, yeah, no, I see that.
And we have been.
It's
we
not
have been
willful.
borrowing the previous participant over the years.
He's pretty available to us?
We do have a tremendous, I mean, he is available to continue, not full-time. He did a tremendous job to plan for these eventuals, so he did restructure the unit and bring them up to a tremendous amount of training to be ready. So our staff is, I think, doing a tremendous job.
I think this is a.
So we don't think it's a hindrance, but it certainly would be a lot more helpful to have one more person to help even the load. And William, This is his 1 week anniversary. So,
Wow.
he brings.
You're not the new guy anymore, though.
he-
Got that going for you.
So we're very pleased, you know, and a number of us sat in on those interviews, and we think he will help us to
Okay.
get that done.
Okay, good.
There have been situations in the past, in local governments and the state government, where jobs like this get transferred over to categories that deal with experience and background, and come off the test list. They want another kind of list, but where you get a list quicker, and you can interview more people. And we should have the option of discussing that with civil service. I think that would be much better, especially in IT positions.
Can we follow up on Commissioner Spano's idea?
Sure.
Thank you. Okay. Is that it from the executive unit? Okay. Then we'll move on to the council/compliance unit, Kim Galvin and Kathleen O'Keefe.
Thank you, Commissioner. My name is Kimberly Galvin, people in the room. We're a relatively new unit that consists of the council's office as well as all of the compliance people that work for the board. The compliance unit has been extremely busy doing the reviews. As Bob mentioned, we had one new hire last week, and a new one started today. We're also interviewing for a vacant phone spot in the phone bank, and Bob Eccles and Cheryl are starting that interview process off the same sort of lists that they just talked about there. We've gone through some training with the compliance staff. We had some customer service training that came in and was taught to them, as well as they rolled out the training department rolled out the new training webcast or seminar, if you will, to everyone in the compliance unit to get them up to speed on what the new thing looks and feels like. We've participated in the various meetings regarding the change and upgrades to the software and the Capus Vitus redesign project. And we've worked with each other, I guess, on some of the hearing officer regulations that you'll see here and the resolutions that will come before the board today to get those in order for your vote today. And that's all I have. Kathleen, do you have anything to add?
Well, we had the January periodic report. Kathleen O'Keefe, I'm the other counsel here. We had the January periodic, all the early letters went out, and anyone that did not subsequently file, that list has been sent over to the Enforcement Council. We are continuing to get requests for the political calendar. We have not generated that yet.
Do you have a number, by the way, Kath, do you have a number on how many people did not file in January?
I don't have it immediately at hand, but it was a pretty significant number. Cheryl, do you?
I don't have that number.
Yeah, we don't have
I
that
can
number
get
here.
to you.
It
It's
was
in the high hundreds,
Thousand.
Yes, it was.
it's over 1,000.
It's a big number. Yes.
That just didn't file, that were required to file
Right.
by law, but did not file.
Right, and we send them a letter saying you should have filed and you didn't file. And these are the folks that didn't comply with that letter, and that's the list that goes over to enforcement. As Kim mentioned, the unit is meeting at this point daily. Bob and Cheryl are meeting with the IT unit and literally answering questions every day on very specific type issues. So that's really moving forward. The recent budget did impact the compliance unit in that there was an amendment to the personal use of campaign funds section. There was also some tinkering that occurred with the independent expenditure law. We've already received a significant number of calls on the new personal use law. We had a pending motion before the Second Circuit to dismiss an appeal that is related to the last primary, believe it or not. That motion was recently granted. Brian and I have completed our admission in all four district courts in New York, and while we were down getting sworn in Brooklyn, we actually went to the Brooklyn board and had the opportunity to see the print-on-demand absentee ballot machine, which was pretty interesting. And so the New York City board is going to be doing something with that with the special election that's coming up. It's a little pilot program. We have.
I'm sorry, Kathleen, I mean to interrupt. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Sure.
Print on demand
Yeah,
absentee ballot, how does that work?
It was pretty interesting. They have a computer where the information for the voter is in there. They put the voter's ID number in, and it generates the ballot that is then sent to the machine that prints the ballot for that particular voter. And then the little attachment on the side folds the ballot, so they can print it in batches based on the ED. And then they just pick up the stack and put them in the envelope. And so it's, in other words, instead of ordering the number of ballots ahead of time and not knowing what you need, you're literally printing as you go. Pretty interesting concept.
So is the advantage it reduces the number of ballots that you have to print because you're doing them individually?
Right, and also the waste that comes from not needing ballots that you've printed.
Because I believe I read, there was a article, I think I read in the paper, that the comptroller's office was somewhat critical of our boards of printing too many ballots in this state because they are wasting so many ballots, I think was the conclusion, I believe, of the comptroller's office. Would this be an effort to address that issue?
The comptroller's office basically, and this is a very broad summary, looked at the different ways that various boards actually meet their ballot requirements. The board gave some feedback with respect to this report because we don't actually agree with the entire summary of the report, but it was comparing the various different ways that boards do it. Some boards print their own ballots, and some boards order ballots from professional printers.
I think it was in the works prior to that report coming out, but it just happens to
But this
address
type
one of
of
the
effort
issues.
would address that issue, is that fair to say, if
Yeah.
other boards participated in
It's
this?
partial, because I think the controller review is more of the election day ballot, which is clearly the larger volume. It's along the same lines of, especially in New York City with the thousands of ballot styles, is how many do you print, wondering if someone needs an absentee ballot as opposed to the election day ballot also. So there are a number of counties that have taken on the responsibility to print their own ballots. Schenectady was one of them. Erie County, Albany County. There's a number of counties that do in-house, they bought the equipment to print their own election day ballots. And I think that the report kind of looked at those costs and the flexibility. You can print as many as you need because you don't have to wait for some vendor to
Fair
deliver
enough.
them.
Did we respond to that report at all?
Yes.
Yes.
No,
And it-
no, we haven't responded to the final, we have a 90-day window to
No,
respond.
we did. They issued the report.
No, they issued the report, but then you have a 90
We're supposed to report
You're
back
supposed
on
to-
their
Did we
report.
respond to their report?
Yes.
So I guess
Yes.
that was.
No, we didn't.
No.
Included in the report.
Included in the report is our response.
Is the response
Oh,
right in
okay.
the report?
There's a
Right.
second response that's required upon the issuance of the report from the agency as to the actions taken or not taken with regards to the recommendations of the report. That has not happened.
Are we in the process of doing that? Are we going to respond to that? I mean, it seemed like there was a big issue they made about the expense that's being incurred out there amongst our counties for these ballots, and that somehow the state board had a role in trying to limit these numbers and how that is being done around the state. Is there a response we're gonna make to that, or is there a change we're gonna make to that? Is there some way we're gonna address that?
I think we already addressed it in the response to the draft report.
Okay.
To the extent the recommendation was to have a further communication with the counties, we figured we have the May conference where the counties will be there, and we would at least review once more with them that what we've already told the controller we have been doing, but our response to that extent, we didn't have any problem including one more communication with the counties.
Okay.
And we would accomplish that since the May conference is coming up, we would do it at that conference.
Okay, can you get me whatever that response is? I'd like to see that. Okay, all right, sorry, go ahead.
Quite all right. So we also have completed the legislative agenda that the board voted to send to the legislature. We're waiting for sign-off before we actually do that. But it has been prepared, it's in the right form. There are a couple of additional proposals that we are continuing to discuss to see if those will also be included in our legislative agenda. We're hoping to get that to the legislature shortly. The contribution limits have increased based on the 4-year cycle with the consumer price index. And we are going to have the board vote on that today because there was a small flaw in the vote that occurred at the last meeting. And so we're correcting that today. We have had many calls about town, village, special, fire, district elections. There seems to be a big gap out there as far as knowledge. Many times the local boards are calling us instead of their town attorney or their village attorney, or the village attorney or town attorney are calling us. So we're hoping perhaps at the ECA conference to address some of the laws that are relevant there, hopefully to help the local boards deal with those types of questions. And I think that's about it.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have elections operations. I believe Anna Savitsro is out today. Is there someone, are you guys gonna handle this?
Quickly for you, I know Anna wanted very much to be here today to welcome you back, but we hope she'll be joining us shortly. And just as part of our personnel, Joe Burns, the deputy, has moved on to greener pastures, so that vacancy is an idea. I think some of the main items, I think if I summarize her written report, the staff did the required acceptance testing of the central count absentee ballot counting system that New York City recently purchased since the last meeting. Clear Ballot Central Count System is the system that is currently in for certification testing as a central count ballot counting system. My understanding that, you know, the preliminary review, the staff had identified some issues, some functional issues that Clear Ballot had to address. They submitted the new source code, and it's working its way through that testing process. I think the estimate, and you know, I only talked with Anna briefly, but she thought probably by June, she thought that testing at least would be completed to be able to make a recommendation to the commissioners whether or not to recommend it for approval.
Bob, I see Bob Warren is right behind you. And you said that they were required to do new source code, so there were code issues? What were the functional issues that they had to address?
There were more of user issues. You would click on certain links and you would get an error message, so they would have to pick it. There were no accuracy issues. At this point, we found no accuracy issues through our preliminary testing, but it was more user type issues. There were some wording issues that they had to correct, the wording issues that displayed on the screen. There were some reporting issues that they had where you would click on for a report, the report wouldn't print. It was those types of issues, but nothing along the lines of accuracy at this point.
And nothing significant that you don't think that they're gonna, they are not in jeopardy of failing certification?
No, not at this point.
Thank you.
I think the only other item that the unit did is, since the last meeting, is we certified the vacancies for the general election. At this time, those were all Supreme Court vacancies. It is a substantial list this year. But other than that, it's the routine work for the unit.
Okay. Thank you. Next is NBRA/PIO. And that, I believe, is John Conklin.
Thank you, Commissioner. We've been busy with media and public inquiries since our last meeting. Our written report is fairly short. I just have a couple of things I would add. Greg and Patrick and the unit are in Warren County today doing a training for NVRA. So for any counties that will see this video file when we get it back, just want to let them know if they have new staff and they want to do some trainings, we can come out and help them out with that. They just need to let us know about that, and we'll be happy to do it. Other than that, I don't really have anything to add to the written report. I don't know if Tom has anything he wants to add.
I do. I have a couple things. Tom Connolly. As a result of the gubernatorial election, we had to make changes to the registration form, which the commissioners had previously approved. I wanted to know, because I know a lot of counties and other people have been inquiring, those forms have been printed and delivered here. They'll be going out to the county board, so they'll be available shortly. As part of that, we've also been getting the translated versions into the required languages to reflect some of the new language in the enrollment box, as well as the new parties, the Women's Equality Party and the Reform Party. That also affects the affidavit envelopes that are used by county boards, so we'll be providing them with revised versions and translations of that document. We've been working with IT to prepare for election night reporting for the special election in May. The two counties down in New York City, Kings and Richmond, so that we'll be prepared to have those results on our website on election night. I did go down with a couple members of IT down to Hawthorne, New York, to visit our disaster recovery site for our new system. We are putting a more robust system down there that we had previously, so that we have almost full, complete backup for our new system that will be going at the College of Nanoscale Science and Engineering. And so we just wanted to go down there to see what the possibilities were for the setup, so that we were making sure that the stuff that we were ordering, which is going down there, we wouldn't have any problems. We had to order some additional connections to facilitate what we kind of envisioned for the backup process. And lastly, I just returned from a conference down in Florida with the Council of State Governments and the Federal Voting Assistance Program. They have an overseas voting initiative, and I'm a member of the technology working group to kind of discuss how we can use technology to help military and overseas voters. And one of those things, actually one aspect of technology, we will be working with IT to get ready for the National Change of Address, which we will run on the beginning of May to prepare county boards to send out their notices in August. This year is the first year that they'll actually have military changes of addresses implemented into the database, so we were looking at running a separate list of military addresses to kind of improve the quality of the address information that we have. We do find that we do get a lot of bounce back on deliverable, because obviously in the military it can be very mobile, and it's not always on their, the forefront of their mind to make sure that the address information is up to date with their local board of elections. That, and we also decided to participate in the interstate cross-check, which was one of the two list maintenance initiatives that was recommended in the Presidential Commission of Election Administration report. We did get our results back. Just a quick summary of what that is there's a number of states, roughly 30, that upload their voter rolls, and so we look for dual registration and or dual voting. So we did ask for a number of counties to consider being part of a pilot group to kind of evaluate how efficient or good that data is as far as cleaning up the lists. So we're going to be working on rolling that out and working with the counties to see how they can implement the information that we receive. But
Tom, let me just,
Sure.
have any counties volunteered to participate in that?
yeah, at this point we have about 4. We'd like to maybe try to open that up a little bit more, just because we have to take a look at being that for the two separate things. We're doing pilot programs for the military NCOA and also for the interstate cross-check. Obviously, we'll be looking at counties that have higher numbers of military voters to judge the efficacy of the military NCOA. With regard to the interstate cross-check, I had spoken with John about this also this morning. I think we might take a look at the data that we received back to see which counties really seem to have a larger amount of the results that are coming back.
Now, can you explain that military NCOA a little bit more?
Sure. I mean, the
don't know
national
if I-
change of address
Yeah.
comes through the U.S. Postal
Yep,
System. So
I'm familiar with that. How does it work with military?
So in September of last year, there's a separate system called MILPARS, and unfortunately I don't know the actual spelling out of the words for that. But it's a military change of address system that military personnel will use as they go from base to base. It's for them to update their information so that all their military documentation can get to the right spot. Last year was the first year that they actually kind of merged the databases, so they're passing that information on that was in MILPARS into the normal NCOA database. So right now, for our military voters, we have a couple of different addresses. We have obviously their mailing address, their residence address, but when they request an absentee ballot, they often may have a completely separate absentee mailing address. So we're gonna be pulling out that separate absentee mailing address, running that through the normal NCOA process to see if we can get any hits from the addition of the military information that they put in last year. So this way, we're just trying to get updated information from our military voters to ensure that we can get them their ballots.
Do we have like a percentage of how many military ballots come back undeliverable?
I do. It can be significant, and it does swing from year to year. At the last general, I'd have to go back and take a look, but it's high single digits right now, which is always a lot more than your regular absentee voter.
What's your regular absentee voter? What would that number be?
Usually
The
closer
low
to one,
singles?
yeah.
It's that low.
And it's also one of the highest in the country.
It is. Ours is higher than most states.
We're either like 48th or 49th.
Why
Well,
would that be?
Well, military lumps together both military and overseas voters, and we have one of the largest, where there's a few other states who have larger naval installations, but we have over 40,000 civilian, the citizens overseas. And that, the kind of, when you do the summary, are in the same survey. But that clearly is the largest group, for whatever reason.
So
they're
you think the
overseas.
reason that we're showing up so poorly is because of our overseas voters, not our military voters?
Well, personally, since you've asked, I think the one issue at the federal level, and I keep reminding Tom, who goes to these meetings, at the federal level, the federal law requires that every time a military person has a change of duty, and they could show up at their duty officer at the new base, that person is supposed to provide them the registration opportunity to update their record. And the GAO report that looked into that has a quite critical eye that the military is not doing that. So that would be the opportunity under the law that they would be provided, the best chance to update their record.
Fair enough, but that
There's
would,
one more
But
factor.
second, this is a new system to try and help us to find. Up till now, they would not tell us where they moved because of the secrecy issues. It was very hard to get through any of these sites that there is any change of address.
One other factor is that we keep a more comprehensive list than almost any other state in terms of, most states will cancel a list or require a request for the ballot to be renewed on an annual or biannual basis, and New York does not do that. So the denominator of the people who get the ballots, we have a process by state law where we will send out more ballots than other states will send out, and the result is that we have a much higher percentage.
so we're not
of
cleaning
people
up
who
our
don't get the
list
ballots.
as
Correct.
often as other states, leading to a larger number of inaccurate.
Correct.
In 2009,
With military voters in particular.
Right. In 2009, the Military and Overseas Voter Empowerment Act changed what had been the standard under UOCAVA, which was 2 general federal elections had to pass. And that application was good for that period of time, and they went to 1 general. Actually, I think it's 1 year. 1 or 2 years. It's 1 year. So New York, when it amended the law in 2010, wanted to be more inclusive than less inclusive, so we kept the 2 federal general election as the period of time that an application is good for. So we could look better, but we might miss people that are still qualified. And I think the policy decision at the time was we'd rather be more inclusive than less inclusive.
And if I may add on to that, one of the things that we're looking to do, and we've been continuing to try to do with the county boards at these conferences, and we will do again in May, is that we really try to stress the importance of trying to take every opportunity they can to communicate with the voter, to get additional forms of information. I know last January I'd given a report where military voters can ask for and overseas voters can ask for their ballots either by mail or by email or by fax. But even for the ones who have requested it by mail, for 50% of those people, we also have email addresses. Many county boards try to send out the ballots to those voters in multiple ways if they can, just to kind of really increase the chances that we're at least reaching that voter. And there are challenges with getting ballots to the voters. There are certainly challenges with getting those ballots back. We can only really control the outgoing process. As Bob mentioned, with regard to what are called voting assistance officers on every single base, I do know, because I did meet the commanding officer at the Naval Air Station in Pensacola while I was down in Florida, and we did discuss, they're trying to really improve their efforts, but unfortunately they have their own challenges, where a lot of times the voting assistance officer or the VAO duty is really just more of a collateral duty for somebody else, and that kind of changes over every couple of years, so it's difficult, but the Federal Voting Assistance Program, which is part of the Department of Defense, certainly acknowledges the problem, and they're trying to do what they can on their end to kind of improve getting the ballots back. I'm good, thank you very much.
Are we finished? Thank you. Thank you, Tom. Okay, next we have ITU, and I guess, I don't know who's gonna present.
I'll take care of
for the campus FIDAS project. Both the,
Can you just identify yourself to everybody so everybody knows who?
just your name.
Just identify yourself to
Oh,
everybody.
sorry, I'm Bill Ryan, I'm the new IT staff person here. Both the Board of Elections and ITS staff continue to work on the migration of the campaign finance data from the old database server to the new system. Phase 1 development for this project, which covers the public-facing reporting aspects of the system, is continuing on. The dates for conducting stakeholder meetings for the project, for project input, are being finalized, and the initial set of calls should be completed by the beginning of May. And delivery of Phase 1 has been retargeted for the fall of 2015, but the remaining phases are still on target. On the data center migration, as Bob mentioned, we've been holding weekly discussions with ITS and their migration team to finalize the plan for relocating our IT resources currently at Building 8 on the Harriman campus to the ITS co-location facility at the College for Nanoscale Science and Engineering. That's the CNSE. The scheduled date right now for the move is May 29th. And on the New York State, the Nysboe refresh project, work is progressing on the project.
I'm sorry, can I just go back to that just so I understand it? So you're saying they're gonna physically move the servers
Yes.
from, what, one building to another?
Building 8.
Building 8 on the campus,
Right.
out to the Nanotech Center on
Yes.
Wolf, or on Fuller Road? Is that what they're doing?
Yes.
And is that something everybody's doing, or is this just the State Board of Elections, or is this a statewide effort, or why are we moving?
We're the
the
last,
story.
they're closing up Building 8 as a data center. I believe we're the last tenant in there. We've pushed this off till after the election. So this is the window of opportunity we've identified.
Is this a one-day move?
No,
We're gonna be
it'll
doing
be
it
the
over the
weekend. We schedule it for the weekend.
So we're gonna communicate both to the counties and to the public. We will take it down the Friday of that weekend, and we may need a certain amount of Monday to come back up. It is a period of time that we've targeted because it's outside of the window of the May school elections, the June village elections, and the regular political calendar. And it's also, I mean, our first target date to move was August, before last August. And with the statewide election cycle, we suggested that that was not the appropriate time to move, and they agreed with us. So this was the period of time that we thought we could handle the move.
But this
and
is
that
the
would be
state moving us, we're not really doing
The
this.
state, we are working with them. The state, OITS has brought in a consultant, I believe IBM is consultant to them to help us.
This was
to
not
make this
voluntary.
work.
Okay,
Yes,
okay.
not
I'm sorry.
voluntary, no.
Sorry.
Back in the Nysboe project, work's progressing on the project. The OE and HP staff are focusing on the requirements and process for setting up the new environments for both production and disaster recovery at the R sites.
You mentioned that we're getting what you call the stakeholder groups and stakeholder meetings. You want to go into a little more detail on what you envision will take place in that process, and the types of people we've invited, and how anybody who thinks they want to be involved in that process can do so.
Okay, I'll field this one. So basically, with regard to the campus FIDAS system, which is gonna be one unified system for candidate management and also for financial disclosure, we kind of identified 3 different categories of users for user groups. First, you have the consumers of the data, which would be like the media and the public who go out now to our website to kind of view campaign financial disclosure documents. We do have the kind of a treasurer group, or the people who are actually using the system to facilitate those filings in the first place.
You have to upload the data.
Correct. And then the last group would be more with the county boards and the county vendors for EMS systems. That's really more for the candidate information that we're getting from them. What we're going to be doing, since we are in phase 1 of the project, we are going to be holding an initial set of I guess, webinars or conference calls. It'll be a webinar where we expect to give the opportunity to those groups a quick explanation of the scope of the project and what we plan to do. Obviously giving those people the opportunity to provide their feedback for either comments on what they don't like about the existing system or what they'd really like to see in a new system. so that we can not really develop the system in a vacuum and get the outside input for those people who are going to be using the system to make sure that as we go into this, this undertaking to redevelop these two very large systems, that we're kind of quote-unquote doing it right. So we'll kind of run through the basics of what we see, the different timeframes for the projects. This would only be the initial call. Obviously, the consumer group is probably more important at this point because phase one is the public-facing reporting. However, we are going to have meetings with all three groups, and then will probably be subsequent meetings after that, depending on the timeframe of the process and the different phases.
Now, who on our side attends those meetings, or who has control over the development and design of the system is attending those meetings?
Well, obviously, I think from the state board, we'll have members of a number of different units, because obviously we have, compliance and council with regard to the financial disclosure. We'll have enforcement has been taking part in some of the meetings internally, election operations with regard to the candidate management side of things, and John and I have been there all along. So, I mean, I think from our side, we'll certainly be there in the room listening and, trying to get feedback. As far as who will be on the other side of the phone call, we're going to be kind of opening it up to, we have a treasurer group that we've used in the past for beta testing new software. We've been accepting recommendations from other people. I know we'll be looking at a number of different government groups for who are also consumers of the data, possibly members of the media. Just opportunity for people to kind of see what we're doing and at least give them the opportunity to kind of give some feedback back.
And if there's somebody who wants to be involved in that process, they contact you and John Conklin?
That certainly would be a fine way of going about it.
Okay. Thank you.
All set? I guess I wanted to ask another question about the report, just in this is, I see our budget is in here, and I'm just asking how the budget came out for the board. Is there any issues with the budget that was adopted?
Well, I start with, it's better than it has been in the past, but it certainly could be better. If we look at our general funding level, it increased by about $342,000, and I think this time it appears to have addressed a major structural problem in our budget, where they will, place certain items on the ballot of propositions, constitutional amendments, and we have to publish them. And the last, when we had 6, it cost us $340,000. Last year was about $260,000. And our budget, even our appropriation level, has been closer to our spending level. So we didn't have that flexibility in our budget to cover those items, and it's been a problem for the last 2 years. So last year, they originally took the money to pay the bill, because it had to get paid, out of our technology budget that is paying for this Campus Vitus redesign. And thankfully, they restored that funding fully in this appropriation, so we're very happy that issue won't impact that project. And the other is, there's a new appropriation of $340,000 that could be used in the future for any future constitutional amendments or publications or any other contractual services that we need to do. So it's more than we have. It's always tight, but I believe, I think, when we've looked at the new model in the last year, I think we are, finally coming up to the final staffing level and training level. I think from looking at the work that the group has been doing, we knew we'd fall a little bit behind because we didn't have the staff, but we had the we had the biggest report due July 15th, and the effective date of the law was June 29th. And then we went into all of the election cycles. So the staff has been working tremendously. I think the model is working as far as getting the work done. I believe once we're fully staffed, it'll be working. So I think from the model of the money, it's okay. This year still would be tight if things break, and these new technology items, as we bring them up. I think there are new efficiencies that we will see with the technology upgrades, but we probably won't see them until the next fiscal year. And one of the critical items that we continue to talk to staff about is, since the candidate management system and the campaign finance system is so old, the estimate we had for that project was $2.4 million. And as we get into the design, if we run, we had that appropriation to deal with it in 2 sources. But if we find, we have two options. We might have to put something into a later phase if we run out of money, or we'll have to go back and make the case since, it's been since 1990s. We might need a little bit more money to finish that project. But I think overall, it's more positive than it has been in the past, and I think it's fortunate that it's higher than it certainly been going the other direction over many years.
So I'm looking at the budget I have here, and it shows $342,000 difference in the regulation of elections. That's the money you're talking about?
Yes.
And then they're down below aid to localities.
But that has not been, there are no new sources of funds for the local governments. There have been no new federal sources of money. That's generally the leftover Help America Vote Act, or the money that the legislature appropriated for poll site improvement or inspector training. So those are just reappropriations of those authorities. A little bit of the federal money in that group. It's all that aid to locality that was, how the leftover money. The health and human services, poll site improvement money, for each of those years, all goes through that account. So there's no real new activity there. The special revenue, other funds.
Are we not spending that money? Is that why it's still remaining in there?
County.
It was all appropriated to the counties.
So it's showing in our budget, but the counties have access to it. Each county was allocated a certain amount, and they're just not using it. Is that a fair statement?
Correct. Correct.
Am I seeing
They're,
$29
in quotes,
million?
banking it.
Am I seeing $29 million there? Is that what I'm looking at here?
Depending on which fund you're looking at, but yes.
And that money's for what? Poll site improvement?
I don't have the number in front of me, but largely 20 million of that was left over in that pot of money that was assigned to the counties to buy new voting equipment. So of the 190 million that was associated to them, that's left over. We call that the shoebox grant, and that stands for something. If Anna was here, she could tell you. But that after we certified that we were in compliance with the requirements of the Help America Vote Act, then we could use that money for other purposes to further the administration of a federal election. So that's where the program changed from us submitting the vouchers directly to OGS to buy election equipment to a grant program where the county spends the money and gets reimbursed through a contract. And many counties have exhausted that money, others have not yet. The education and training, there's still a pot of money there of the original $10 million appropriation. It's probably over $3.4 million is left in that account. Out of the 2000, the Health and Human Service is a series of grants that were annual, so those sunset at the end of 5 years. I think we only have, Greg and Patrick administer that program. I think we only have 1 or 2 more years left, otherwise they've either spent their money or they've been taken back by the federal government. The only other pot of money that we have that's in there is there was that state money that we received in 2006 through Senator Flanagan, I believe, when John was there, for the $5 million appropriation for poll site, for temporary poll site, or no, poll site access improvement. So that could be used for permanent activity. There has been some talk in the budget discussions where they go in money that hasn't been spent over 7 years, where they take it back. That pot has not been taken back because we used that $5 million appropriation as part of New York's 5% local match that we had to do for the state portion of the money. So if the state were to take that back here and use it for something else, they would have to restore that money, because that's what we claimed as the match money, and it was accepted as that. So that money's still available to counties.
The counties are told continually, though, about their money, and you spend their money and use their money, and it's not like they don't know it's there.
Okay.
They tell them often and regularly.
Okay.
Yes, especially the federal money, we lose that at the end of the federal fiscal year, so the end of September, and our staff, there's no doubt that the reason why the county, why that money goes back to the federal government is because the county didn't do something, because Greg and Patrick are on them repeatedly to make sure they know, and that there's no miscommunication that there's a voucher in the works somewhere, because if the voucher isn't paid in the fiscal year, it's gone. So we work very hard to make sure that it's not for lack of trying.
Okay. Okay. So I think we're finished with that, and then enforcement.
I have to mention some,
Teresa?
We have, I've been discussing over the past several meetings about the Division of Election Law, and Election Law Enforcement obtaining a case management program. And we have been successful in doing that, and we are in the process of having that program loaded and having, so that it'll be available to us to have our cases and all of our processes loaded into that program. That should be able to better serve us in managing and keeping track of all of our investigations and what we're doing within the division. We are working with compliance and with counsel on the, or we have been on the hearing regulations that you'll be looking at today. We made some suggestions, some were accepted, some were not. We have been working with the division on other issues that have been confronting both the division and the compliance unit as to committees that have come to our attention. Sometimes committees that are coming to our attention really deserve to be treated by compliance rather than by the enforcement unit. And we have tried to work out a process where we feel, or if I feel that the committee is better served by compliance, that perhaps compliance takes their first attempt with the committee to deal with the compliance of that committee so that they can come into compliance rather than be treated by the enforcement division. I think at the last meeting I had a vacancy with one of my attorneys. That attorney has started. His name is Jay Arnold. He has been working, I think, for the past maybe month and a half. So I am at full staff. And we too are getting many, many calls from the local committee, the local governments, the villages and the towns, seeking assistance. Sometimes we refer them back to the compliance unit, and sometimes we try to help them in asking them, answering their questions as well. So that takes not a good part of our time, but it has increased as the months have gone on.
Okay. Any questions? No? Okay, I think that finishes the unit report. Next order of business is old business. I believe this is the contribution limit issue that was raised earlier. There was a technical mistake, as I understand it, in the previous reg, and this is meant to correct that.
So I move that we adopt the revision to Part 62, 14.0 campaign contribution limits as drafted and submitted to the commissioners in order to correct the error that was in the list that was adopted last time.
Is there any discussion? I think just for, could someone just identify what the error was?
Yes.
It was a typo in the maximum contribution of party committee. The calculation comes up to 109,600. The last, when we typed the resolution, it said 109,000.
I see.
So the calculation work that the staff did when it got translated into the resolution just said it was a typo.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's adopted. Next is new business. We have a hearing officer process, Part 6218, in relation to civil enforcement hearings. And who would like to explain that? Todd, Bob?
I'll take a stab at it if you
Kim,
like.
could you explain that?
Basically, when enforcement was created, there are provisions in that authorization that will require the State Board of Elections to do potentially many more frequent hearings. So we needed to establish the requirements that the hearing officers would in fact follow, and then create a pool that the board would approve to be randomly chosen in the event that a hearing is required on a civil, non-criminal issue. So, the staff, almost all of us, I think, worked on the language in this, and as Risa, I think, mentioned, she made some comments, some were accepted, some were not. I think Brian Quayle did most of the drafting and the amendments, but basically this is the agreed to draft that we put before the commissioners for acceptance. Right, Brian?
Yes.
Well,
It's,
not agreed to by me.
By the board, proper staff.
So this is a hearing officer process that occurs if there's someone who's out of compliance.
Well, the statute provides that after an investigation by me or my staff, that if there are no criminal charges that are found during the course of the investigation, if there are violations that could be civil in nature, the legislature has added a step, rather than go directly to a special proceeding. There could be a hearing officer process under the SAPO, which is the State Administrative Procedure Act. And the statute provides that the board should appoint a group of hearing officers to conduct those hearings.
Okay.
And it also gives the board, the state board, the power to create regulations. And these are the regulations that came out of that.
Okay, okay. Can I just, is this the process that's holding up pursuing failures to file?
This, yes, well, this is the process that I have requested that we do. The hearing officer process is the process that I've requested in order to go forward on failure to file as well as other civil enforcement processes.
Okay.
Because the statute does say that if there are not hearing officers appointed, that I could take those directly to a special proceeding. But I feel that there is a better process by going to a hearing officer initially.
So do you anticipate that a person who fails to file this number that was referenced earlier of 1,000 failures to file in January, each one of those would get a hearing before they pursued?
My hope, the last time that we, first of all, we got that list yesterday, that
Fair
list
enough.
of people. In July for the hearing, the failures to file, we sent out, my division sent out approximately 500, more than 500 letters. Over 270 of those letters came back as undeliverable. Under the former procedure, since those letters came back, those people did not come into compliance. Since they didn't get the letter notifying them that they needed to come into compliance, that they were not in compliance. That process that was in place, the next step would have been to file a special proceeding. And then there would have been an attempt to serve those people with the special proceeding. My goal is to get a good address for those people, to notify those people that they're not in compliance, and make an attempt to bring them into compliance before bringing them into a litigation process. And I have taken steps to bring a program into my bureau, my division, that will help me obtain good addresses so that we can notify those people that they have a responsibility to file, get a good address for them, notify them that they have a responsibility to file, and bring them into compliance.
Okay.
Because I think that it's better to notify people to get them into compliance rather than just sending, filing a special proceeding in a lawsuit when they don't know that they've been, that they have to come into compliance.
I don't disagree. So this regulation we're adopting then really doesn't have any specific impact on the failure to file issue. That's more of a address issue, that's more of a notice, due process issue. You feel that you're not right now sufficiently giving notice and due process to those individuals before you sue them.
Well, I would like to have that process, and that would include the people that would be coming into the hearing officer process. Because if I file those 500, those 270 hearing officer reports, then I don't know how I would notify those 270 people that they have to come before the hearing officer. And then we would be in the same situation. The hearing officer would make a ruling, and we would be in the same situation of people not notified.
That's fair enough. I guess my concern is that we don't make this more cumbersome than it needs to be. And that, you know, I know in the past, this board has been very active in pursuing people who fail to file anything, and there's no real dispute about whether they're in compliance. It's just a fact they just didn't file at all, which I think is indisputably not in compliance with the statute. And they have been pursued, and I know they always did pursue them. When I was here, we always made the effort to pursue those individuals, those treasurers, to try to bring them into compliance, meaning file something, or we are going to sue you. So I guess, I understand your concern about having accurate information. I guess in my own mind, I'm not clear why it's so inaccurate, because my sense is you're using treasurer information that's been filed here by the treasurers themselves. So it's curious to me why so many of those addresses are wrong, when I think that's the information they've given this board as to the filer's name, the treasurer's name and address. But if that's the case, that's the case. Okay, fair enough. But I guess from a procedural standpoint, this hearing officer process, to put that other layer on having those people then go through a hearing before they're pursued, is adding another bureaucratic layer to people that just haven't filed anything. And to me, filing is a minimal requirement that people have to meet here.
What the legislature added to the process, Commissioner. And when we're talking
No,
about.
the legislature said though, if there's no hearing officer, you can go into court.
I
Which is what
understand.
we've been doing, and.
I understand that,
So
Commissioner,
now
but-
you have, nobody's filed in July. The non-filers from July have not been prosecuted. The non-filers for the primary have not been prosecuted.
When we're talking about the election cycle filers, we're talking about different numbers, and we're talking about a different process that I put into place. We have been in touch with the people and the non-filers in the election cycle, and those people are being treated in a different way. Those people are being reviewed, as are, last time you asked me about the 100 or so people that did come into contact with my division and still didn't come into compliance. Those people are being treated a different way. Those cases are being looked at individually to see how we're going to treat them. So we're bringing those election cycle non-filers either into compliance, or we're looking at them specifically to decide whether they're frequent non-filers and needing to be looked at either in a civil manner or a criminal manner. And we're making that decision now. So we're not treating the January and July periodic non-filers the same as we are the election cycle non-filers. And those are maybe 50 people, not hundreds. So you can't make those the difference. We're talking completely different categories in those.
So when do you expect to make those decisions with respect to the primary non-filers?
Well, I think we'll be talking about several of them today.
I don't know how that answers the question, because none of what we're talking about today is issuing subpoenas, is not pursuing the judgments. And the law says if you've missed 3 filings, you can get a $10,000 judgment.
Well,
And-
you can get a maximum of the $10,000.
Well, the board won every one of those cases. We got 10,000 on every one of the non-filers, of the chronic non-filers. historically, and those proceedings were usually started 2 or 3 months after the non-filing date, and we're talking about the September primary, and still, all right, well, we can talk about it in executive session. But I echo Commissioner Kosinski's comments or inference that for the non-filers, I don't see why we're waiting for the hearing officer process to do that.
I understand that's.
But in the meantime, I also think we should
Yep.
get this going.
That's
So
fine,
maybe we
that's
should
fine.
talk about the substance of, if there are any issues that need to be addressed. I'm comfortable with the staff recommendation, but if there are proposed changes or dissent from any of these provisions, perhaps we should hear about it.
No, I think they did a fantastic job. It was a work in progress, and it was a cooperative effort, and I think what we've arrived at really covers it.
My understanding is these are to go out for comment now? That's the stage they're in?
Well, they're ready to be filed, and then the formal comment
And then
period.
there'll be a
would-
comment
right,
period, and then they'll
exactly.
come back to us for final adoption,
Right.
correct?
And so I don't delay this anymore, I will put my comments in the public comment section.
I think that'd be appropriate. So I think we should try to move this along to at least get it in the pipeline, so. I have a motion,
So moved.
I have a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so we've adopted those. And those will go out for public comment when? Do you have any idea when they'll actually hit the?
It's 45 days from the publication, so the staff will have to submit the paperwork.
How soon will those be published? Do you have any idea?
We've had a tendency to post them informally on our website
I'm
to
not
start
sure
the
they
public
have
at least seeing this version, while that takes its path, so people can at least have a copy and start their informal comment period. But it all depends on the date that the staff submits it, the
I
Department
mean,
of State publishes.
is that within a week, 2 weeks, a
No,
month?
we're
Right,
talking-
and there are regular
Right,
deadlines,
right.
you file it, and then it basically gets published 2 weeks later.
Right, so we're talking like a month?
No, we
Or
can do
less,
this in
2 weeks.
days.
Okay,
right.
good, okay, good. All right, so the next is Regulation Part 6203 in relation to investigations. This is another regulation. I don't know who wants to speak to that.
This is a regulation that updates the current 6203 to comply with the changes to the structure of the agency, to the titles and the conforms it to the new law.
You guys tell me a little bit more than that.
Basically, there's an existing reg that already addresses this, and how subpoenas are issued at the board by commissioners or by staff.
Okay.
The current reg does not reflect the current titles of the staff, because there's been a new configuration here at the board over the last year or so. So part of it is just technical cleanup type of thing. And then what we also were looking to do was to include the subpoena issue that appears in the new enforcement statute, in order to allow that to make it clear that how that works, that the enforcement council comes to the board, and the board votes to grant the subpoena. We already have the subpoena reg, so we thought that was the appropriate place to put that.
Okay,
I move.
motion? Second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Now let me ask you this on that. Do these also go out for public comment? Is this also in that same, that's also in the same mode,
Yes,
right?
and
Where these go
the-
out?
Yes, and
Yeah.
the thinking was that we would replace the current regulation with this proposed regulation.
But this will go out for public comment,
Yes.
and then we'll come
The
back to us.
same scenario, yes.
Right, okay. Okay, next is a resolution regarding the appointment of members of the Division of Election Law Enforcement as special investigators. And I don't know who wants to speak to this.
I would be happy to do that. Let me just get the, okay, so the current statute, 3107, addresses special investigators, and the way that it reads, it's primarily in the area of violations of the elective franchise. And then there are numerous other pieces in that particular section. The new law that affects the Enforcement Council requires the Enforcement Council to come to the board to get subpoenas. This resolution makes it clear that the two statutes basically have to be harmonized. In other words, any kind of authority that 3107 may allegedly provide to special investigators has to be viewed and has to be read in light of the new statute, 3104. There was concern raised that if 3107 is read to provide an independent subpoena power for the special investigators that the board has appointed, then why would the Chief Enforcement Council ever have to come to the board for a subpoena as 3104 requires? So this resolution is just making it clear that 3107 does not provide a separate grant of authority to the special investigators employed by the enforcement unit that gets around the requirement in 3104. And it just wasn't clear in the original resolution that that was the case.
Did you have a comment, Risa?
No, I
Okay.
don't know why they think that I would ever do that, but
Okay.
I have no problem.
Okay, I mean, do you have any problem clarifying the problem?
I mean, it was, the original draft was changed at my request, so it's not.
Okay, good.
I move the resolution.
Is there a second? All in favor, say aye.
All right?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So those three items are completed. We move on.
Peter, there
Yeah.
was one item I wanted to just mention on this, is that
Sure.
the commissioners have received 2 requests for board opinions on personal use pursuant to the 14-130 provisions that were just added to the law by the new budget reforms. And my understanding is that, well, for one of them, I'm recusing myself, so I'm only applying to the one that I'm not recusing myself for, and for that one that the commissioners were going to direct that council prepare an informal response promptly, because it relates to an incident, a decision that needs to be made immediately, and that the commissioners will review the informal response at the next meeting for a formal opinion.
Okay, fair enough. I'm expecting now that the legislature's changed the personal use statute, there will be probably a large number of these requests coming in. I think we need to be responsive. We need to be prepared, the staff, to address them as best you can, relatively quickly, so people are advised as to what the rules are. But I think you should be prepared for a influx of these because of the change. I haven't fully reviewed the change myself, but I'm sure.
Yeah, it specifically says that they can come to us and we shall issue
Yeah,
opinions
yeah.
regarding for the personal use statute, so.
So I think we should.
I just wanted to confirm that the 4 commissioners all agree that the councils will promptly
Sure.
respond with an informal opinion.
Right. I think some are more time sensitive than others, so I
Right.
understand that, so. Okay. And then we had one other item that Commissioners Kellner and Spano wanted to raise today.
All right. That's why I think many people are here today. The motion I want to put before the commissioners is that the commissioners direct our councils to prepare an opinion that will rescind opinion 1996-1 and provide updated guidance on the applicability of Article 14 to limited liability companies. So that's my motion. I'll ask for a second, and then we can start discussion.
I'd like to, I guess, just discuss this briefly. I don't know if there's any other discussion you're in favor of. So,
Well, obviously, I'd like to speak in support of my motion. when
okay,
it's
well then if you want to
appropriate,
speak,
and then-
you go ahead and speak.
And I note that several people have contacted us and requested to make a short presentation to the board that would require the commissioner's consent, and would allow, I would agree to brief presentations, but I realize the commissioners have to agree to that. All right, now in terms of my speaking in support of the proposition, I think many people are familiar with the letter of the Brennan Center that identifies the problem that limited liability companies were not in existence at the time that Article 14 was adopted. And so Article 14 does not use the word limited liability companies or specifically address that issue. I might add that that there was a time when Article 14 did not address partnerships, and this board crafted a policy that has been fairly well defined. If I recall it correctly, if a partnership contributes more than $2,500, then it's required to attribute the contributions to the members, the individual members of the partnership, and the contribution limitations would then apply to those individual members. At the time this board adopted the opinion on how to deal with limited liability companies, it was following a policy adopted by the Federal Elections Commission, which the Federal Elections Commission subsequently decided that it was in error and changed its policy, so that the federal policy is to treat limited liability companies as partnerships unless they have elected tax treatment to be treated as corporations, in which case they would be treated as corporations, and at the federal level, corporations are not allowed to make any contributions at all. One of the reasons I haven't actually done a draft, but hope that councils could address it and negotiate a resolution on this point, is that there are several ways that our board could go. That in particular, I would favor treating limited liability companies as partnerships. I am aware of the letter that was sent by the Business Council objecting to even reconsidering the policy, in which they cite the definitions of limited liability companies as unincorporated associations. And I would point out that if we actually carefully applied the statute to the theory that the Business Council has advocated, that using the strict language of 14-116, 14-116(1) prohibits corporations or joint stock companies from making political contributions. And it is subdivision 2 of 14-116, which authorizes corporations, but not joint stock associations, from making aggregate contributions of not more than $5,000. Applying a limited liability company as an unincorporated joint stock association would prohibit limited liability companies from making any contributions at all, and would not even limit them to the $5,000 contribution. I am not advocating that, and I think that most of the persons who've communicated with us so far are advocating the route that they should be treated in the same way as partnerships, so that the contributions are attributed to the members of the LLC on an allocated basis, at least for larger contributions. And one of the issues to discuss would be whether the partnership threshold, which was adopted many years ago, should remain at $2,500, and whether the same threshold for limited liabilities companies should be as it is for partnerships. We received a fairly scholarly letter on the subject from the Brennan Center. We've also received a letter from the Attorney General urging us to take action in this regard. And I certainly agree with those sentiments that action is long overdue on this subject. And so I would urge that we adopt the resolution to have our councils draft a new opinion on this subject. Thank you.
Okay. Any,
Yeah, I'd like to say something. I thought
Sure,
you
go
were gonna
ahead.
say something.
no, I'll let you guys go ahead.
Okay, I'm the only non-lawyer here, so I don't understand anything he said. But it was very important. I understood. I come at this from a different perspective, okay? I was a candidate numerous times, and I accepted money from LLCs. Why? Because it was there, and you needed money, and you accepted it, it was legal. Okay, so we're not discussing who accepted money, who didn't accept money. We're just talking about fairness and what's happening with money in campaigns. So this week I went on the internet and I said, let me look up money, campaigns, where it's going, all that stuff. And I came up with this sloppy syllogism that, so don't hold me to every single fact and number here, but I just want to give you an impression, okay? In the 2012 federal elections, 1% of just over 31,000 individuals contributed 28% of all contributions. In many major elections, about 5% of the contributors contribute about 60% of the money. Now, this one I loved. Americans spent roughly $9 billion illegally gambling on the NCAA tournament, while $3.7 billion was spent to influence the midterm elections of 2014. However, 12.6% of the population bet on the NCAA tournament, and only 0.02% of the population made contributions to the 2014 election. Now, there was an article in the New York Times on April 1st that talked about how this is the first year in a long time that the number of new startups, corporations, and businesses dipped below the number of corporations and businesses that went out of business. So the number went down. And there was a whole article on it, but I pulled out this particular comment from one of the MIT economists. Now, we know about economists in one arm and the other arm, but this made my point. Contemporary American politics have become an economic hindrance, according to this economist at MIT. It is becoming more and more difficult to run a successful business in the United States without doing lobbying, campaign contributions, and other deals with politicians. This, I think, is the most dangerous, and I would even say nefarious, trend for creativity of American business in general, and young and new businesses, which so badly need it in particular. Now, that's the comment. So, based on my syllogism going up and down, if this is true, less than 5% of 0.02% of our population is influencing the government and what the government does. That's the influence of money in politics. Now, what we're talking about today is insignificant in terms of that process, in terms of these figures, in terms of that money. What I think is something we should do symbolically, at least as a board, to say, hey, we don't think this is what should be happening. You have the President of the United States just the other day saying that, just opining, is that the word you guys use? Opining. That, that we should maybe have mandatory voting. Because he knows what every politician knows, is that if you have everybody turn out, the money gets less and less effective. Doesn't matter how much money you have. Because the money focused can't do anything when you have such a large group, like dropping a pebble in an ocean. So this is significant if we do something about it, and I would like to. If we say, just as a board to the general public, hey, we don't like all this stuff going on with money. It's not going to make a significant difference, but you know where we are. We gotta make a difference somehow. And for all the groups that sent us letters, I admire your passion. But in the scope of things, it's minuscule. This is minuscule. This is just a statement. You want to get to it, get people to turn out and vote, somehow change the significance of how they vote. And I mean, you need a constitutional amendment to change this. I don't even know if you get that far. But you have to go somewhere else and think outside the box and not inside the boxes, which is where you are. So I'm in favor of your resolution, whatever they're going to bring up.
That was
Okay. I appreciate that. I know there are a number of people here that I believe are here for this particular issue. We have received the documents that were referred to from the Brennan Center, Citizens Union, Business Council, I believe the Attorney General's office also. If there's anyone here that wants to speak, that has something to say that's not in one of these letters that we have received today, I would offer you a couple minutes to do that to the board, but I would like to restrict it to comments that are not already, we've already read the comments that are in these letters, we're familiar with them, the arguments that have been made. If there's something else that anybody would like to offer to the discussion, I think we'd be willing as commissioners to listen to that on a limited basis. I don't think we're going to go on too long, but if there is anybody that has a particular point they want to make that hasn't already been made, I think we'd offer maybe 2 to 3 minutes for a person to do that if they'd like to, or if there's somebody who'd like to do that. And I don't know what groups are here, but if we could have it, limited to 1 or 2 people that can do that for us.
Sure. I'm Larry Norton. I'm from the Brennan Center.
Yep.
I'm joined here by my colleague, Dan Weiner. First of all, thank you for permitting us to have a moment to speak, and congratulations, Commissioner Kaczynski, for being appointed. I wanted to make you have our letter, so I don't need to repeat what's in there, but I do want to make a couple of quick points. One is that this last election showed how much worse the problem has become with LLCs being used to circumvent individual contribution limits. Gannett reported that in the last 2-year cycle, the amount that was provided to candidates from LLCs was $25 million. That's to candidates, never mind political committees and parties. That's 8 times, according to Gannett, the amount that have been contributed in the previous 12 years. So the floodgates have really opened on the LLC loophole. We've gone from essentially what was a river to an ocean. There's been a lot of talk about the contribution limits and the circumvention of contribution limits, the fact that these were set up to prevent corruption. And in fact, when somebody can contribute $1 million to a single candidate, more than $1 million, I think for a lot of people that raises corruption concerns through LLCs. But there is also an element of the disclosure regime that was set up by the legislature, which again was meant to prevent corruption and was meant to provide the voters with real information. And with LLCs, we don't have the kind of disclosure that we would under contributions that were made by an individual or a partnership attributed to an individual. As you all know, the Moreland Commission on Corruption identified this loophole as one of the problems in New York State's campaign finance law and antithetical to the purpose of the campaign finance laws, which again was to prevent corruption. And the last thing I would say, on a day when corruption in Albany is yet again in the headlines, I think it would be very appropriate for the board to act today to revisit its opinion. And frankly, as the Brennan Center, I think, made clear in its letter, we believe that a plain reading of the text means that you are required to do so.
Okay, thank you.
I would like to make a brief statement. My name is Rachel Foss. I'm here from Citizens Union. I just wanted to speak for some of the other groups that I know that many of us have sent you our own letters, but our members are also very engaged and involved. And we believe that over 8,000 New Yorkers have taken the time to write to you individually to tell you that they believe this loophole should be changed. And because of that, we think there is significant public support. And I just wanted to raise that to your attention. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you want to say something, that's fine. I have one more comment to make.
We have
Oh,
one
yeah,
more.
I'm sorry.
One more person.
I have a little something good to say. My name is Susan Weber. I'm volunteer coordinator for MoveOn.org here, and I'm a newly appointed member of the Board of Directors of the Albany Museum of Corruption. And I'm happy to, and we're having our museum, we're creating our museum because it's what Albany is famous for, corruption. And I'm here to ask that this board follow through and do real meaningful LLC closure. And the reason I opine, Mr. Spano, the reason I opine that so few people vote nowadays is because they don't think it matters. It doesn't matter because the big people buy the policies. And those policies reflect the desires and the needs of the big people, not the people who vote. And you can do something to really change this and make it better, take back our democracy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to, and I'm sure maybe Commissioner Peterson wants to say something, but I'm going to just weigh in, I guess. The opinion from 1996, and I think we've looked at it, I know we've looked at it, and I was actually here when that opinion was rendered back in those days. And it was done based upon New York State law, and I just referenced the opinion itself that analyzes the limited liability company law in New York State and concludes that they have determined that that law makes them not subject to corporate contribution limits because by definition those entities are unincorporated. I know there's been quite a bit of emphasis put on the whole change of opinion that the federal government put out, and that there is a reference in this opinion from 1996 to the federal government's treatment of LLCs. But I would note that the opinion itself did not rely on the federal government's treatment. It relied on New York State law's treatment. That has not changed since 1996. This issue has been revisited many times. It's been revisited here several times. I think in 2001 there was another opinion that this board put out reaffirming the 1996 opinion. Again, I believe in 2008 this was revisited. I know it's also been discussed extensively over in the Capitol with the legislature. It's my belief that that's where it should be discussed. This is not a matter for an administrative agency, the State Board of Elections, to decide. This is a matter for the state legislature to decide. If the state legislature feels that the limited liability companies should be limited in their contributions further than what they already are, that's their prerogative to do so, as they've done with corporations. But to date, they have chosen not to. And I think a lot of the groups that are here today know that they've spent time in the legislature seeking that change. It has not occurred. In my opinion, it would be inappropriate for a state agency, a bureaucratic agency, to usurp the legislative prerogative and to administratively impose a new limit on an entity that's been around for 20 years and that has been treated a certain way, that the legislature has chosen not to change, despite a great deal of discussion over these many years about the potential of change. But to have a state agency step in and make that change unilaterally, I think is inappropriate, and I don't think is the role of this board. Our role is to administer the law, not make the law, not change the law. There may be many laws here we don't agree with. There may be many laws we don't like. But our job here is not to change them. We don't have that authority. That authority is across the street in the legislature. I had the pleasure of working in the legislature for several years, and I respect their role in this entire environment. They're the ones that set the rules. There's a very complex scheme in this state for campaign finance contribution limits. We have limits on partnerships, corporations, individuals. PACs, associations. They're all treated in many different ways. The legislature has created this very comprehensive system of campaign contribution limits in New York State. I feel we have to honor that. That's their prerogative to do so. We administer it. We enforce it. We make sure it's complied with, but we don't create it. And I think that what you're asking us to do here today is to create a new law that would impose a new limit on a specific entity.
Good.
I also feel very strongly that these are very important issues. These are directly affecting First Amendment rights in this country. When you start talking about campaign finance issues, you're talking about people's First Amendment rights. I think those are constitutional issues protected by the New York State and federal constitutions. To have a state agency affecting people's First Amendment rights, I think is also very troubling. I think that's something for the elected officials of this state and this country to do. They're the people that represent the people. They're the people that should be making the laws that affect people's First Amendment rights, and that is exactly what we're talking about here today. I don't feel that we have the authority to make this change, and I feel that this discussion should be taken to the legislature as it has been, and I know it's been discussed. I know it's discussed partially in the context of this year's budget. No changes were made, and I feel it would be inappropriate for us to make the changes that the legislature has chosen not to make. And that's my position.
I served many years in elected office, and one thing I learned over those years was never turn a deaf ear to what's presented to you. And I know there was a lot of work and a lot of effort put into research and presenting a very cogent and solid argument in the literature that we had received. I read every one of them. And I thought about it, and then I thought about my responsibility. I'm not in elected office anymore. I'm in an appointed office. And this is an administrative body. And if we were to work in an ultra vires manner, I mean, beyond our authority, we are really short-circuiting the responsibility of our elected officials. Now, some people say, well, they don't act properly. Well, you know what? Then they have to be out of office and vote somebody else into office. Well, they don't do this right, or this one's corrupt, and this one's not. You know what? The system is changing. There's a tremendous spotlight right now on all elected officials, especially in their legislative capacity. That light should be shined on them, and arguments made and presented to them. You know, we have to look at both sides of an issue. The Citizens Union and the McCutcheon cases kind of indicate that things are going in a little bit of a different way as far as protecting free speech, First Amendment. And that is part of an argument, but you know what? That's one side of it. There are many sides, it's a many-faceted argument. But I look at it very honestly as responsibility that was given to me as a commissioner in the New York State Board of Elections to make sure that the elections that we oversee are done honestly, and that they are done properly, where we can facilitate that process, that we do that, and that we try to the best of our ability to make sure that everybody can and does vote, and that those rights are not infringed upon. Once those votes are in and they have elected somebody, it is that person's responsibility, that legislator's responsibility, and his duty or her duty to make changes in the law should that law be appropriately changed, should they feel that that should be changed, should their constituency say that should be changed. And there obviously are reasons for arguments on both sides of that. I don't think it's our prerogative to short-circuit that process. We live in a democratic society. We have elected officials whose responsibility it is to make those changes. So as much as I appreciate what has been presented to us, I certainly I can't really, well, how do I want to put this? I can't vote. No, that's not the case. I can't usurp the authority of our legislators, and so I can't support a change at this level. It's the wrong place, it's the wrong venue.
Can I respond to that?
Sure.
And to what you said?
Sure, go ahead.
This is just the perspective I'm listening to. And if I'm wrong, you tell me. Initially, the ruling was made here at the Board of Elections.
Do you want me to respond to that?
Yeah.
Initially, the board issued an opinion interpreting state law.
Okay.
interpreting state law.
And then subsequent to that, they went through another sequence where they did that a number of other times. Is that what you're saying?
We interpret state law, yes,
No,
we've
no,
done.
you said that they met. the
Oh,
board met.
there were other requests made over the years to revisit the issue.
which have all been unsuccessful. I mean, I made
No,
the
my-
last
my
one in
point is, if
2007 or
That was a venue
2008.
before, why isn't it a venue now? If the board's opinion is important enough to go through all that rigmarole for, what, almost 20 years? Why can't we discuss this now, and why can't we vote on it now?
We are discussing it now.
Well, when we vote on it,
We are, I think we're
We're
going to
about
take
to.
some sort of vote, I guess. You guys have made a motion. I'm telling you, though, that nothing has changed statutorily since 1996 that would warrant changing what was said in 1996. That's what I'm saying. So the opinion, opinion number 1, 1996, is still valid today because the state of the law continues to be the same. And our only job is to interpret the statute. The statute
so-
remains the same.
suppose we tell you right now, we're interpreting it differently. For
I-
every PhD, there's an equal and opposite PhD. For every lawyer, there's an equal and opposite lawyer. I mean, just because you went through this for, what is it, Supreme Court rule, Dred Scott, Missouri Compromise, and then they sort of, they're not there now. Same Supreme Court. So why should we be there now? If we have different evidence, we have different research, we have support, why should we be there?
I see nothing new that's been presented that changes the analysis that was made in the 1996 opinion.
And I respect that. I don't see it that way.
Fair enough.
All right, I agree with Commissioner Spano. I wanted to add one thing about what people say is the limited liability company loophole, and that is that Section 14-120 of the election law requires that campaign contributions be under the true name of the contributor. And that means that it is illegal and a crime to use an entity as a mere conduit for a contribution. So to the extent that somebody provides money to an LLC and then has the LLC make a contribution, that is a crime. And I would certainly urge the the Independent Enforcement Counsel, Ms. Sugarman, to take a look at two classes of suspicious LLC contributions. One is where there is a large contribution from a limited liability company that does not appear to have any business purpose or source of business income. And that would be a suggestion that that limited liability company may be being used as a conduit to launder campaign contributions that are not made under the true name of the contributor. And the second area of investigation that I would urge Independent Enforcement Counsel to look at is where there are a large number of LLCs that appear to be making contributions on the same day and that the contributions are coordinated, where the aggregate would otherwise exceed the personal contribution limit. And here we get into a little bit of a gray area, which is one of the reasons why I urge that the interpretation be corrected to treat a limited liability company as a partnership for the purposes of Article 14 of the election law, is that we're so you see contributions of $5,000 each by multiple limited liability companies, and altogether they aggregate more than what the individual contribution limitation would be. The question is whether in fact that is being used as a conduit to launder a political contribution. And those should be investigated, and that's already illegal.
Yeah, I'm
So,
sorry, Commissioner,
I'm
I
sorry
don't
I'm
interrupt.
off the
Yeah,
point, yeah.
I'd like to stick to the point, if we could,
Okay.
of this particular
Okay.
request that
Well-
that's before us on the opinion. I believe you're not on the
All right, I
issue.
apologize
If we
for
could
that.
just stick to
and,
that. If you have any more
and
comments
then
on that?
My last comment is that, to me, the letter from the Attorney General on this subject was very important because it shows that the Attorney General would be prepared to support that reinterpretation of the board in a matter that surely will be litigated. Thank you.
Okay. Any other discuss? So you've made a motion. Is there a motion that was to,
That was my
Revisit.
motion, was to direct councils to
Prepare an opinion to rescind 1996 number 1 and apply applicable guidance regarding contributions of LLCs.
thank you.
thank you. All right, I just want to say, I do not support that, as you may have sensed from what I said. I mean, I don't want to, be perceived as just saying no necessarily. I just want it understood what our basis here is, that this has to do with who has the authority to render the applicable laws related to contribution limits in this state. That's something the state legislature does, not the State Board of Elections. I cannot support that request.
I'm in full agreement, as I have said, and certainly laws on the books right now making certain acts that have been described here as criminal and that certainly can be described as voted on.
So I believe the motion fails. Okay, so that I believe is the end of today's public session. We will adjourn and we have a,
We need a formal motion.
I'm sorry, is there a motion to adjourn?
Well, no, we need a motion to
I
go.
apologize.
No, it's your first meeting.
I'm sorry.
And you've done a spectacular job chairing this meeting.
Okay, a motion to go into executive session to
Uh,
discuss
Enforcement
enforcement
cases.
cases.
Next meeting?
We should discuss the next meeting.
Oh, I'm sorry, next meeting, you want to discuss that now as well? That's fine.
We didn't have a chance to talk ahead of time, but with the ECA conference.
And we will not be going back into public session, is that fair to say? I don't want
We don't
to
anticipate.
let people think that, okay.
Right.
Go ahead.
We don't anticipate.
I don't anticipate going back into public session.
Well, we're looking at, because of the conference, June 9th, 10th, 11th, if that works, if there's a collection.
Right?
For a meeting?
Absolutely.
Okay,
If that works for.
as far as I know.
Before
What day of the week, sorry? That's fine, I really don't care. Pick a day, I'll try to accommodate.
9th, 10th, 11th.
I've got just a little, I'm retired.
Every day is Saturday now.
It is, every day's Saturday. No, it's fine.
10th?
Wednesday, the 10th.
Wednesday the 10th.
Wednesday, June 10th.
Yeah, we're gonna take a little break, everybody, because I need some time. We're gonna take a few minutes, maybe 15 minutes or so between these meetings, get everybody out of here and.